I want to talk to you guys about something that I call new student syndrome. And I think that this is a bizarre phenomenon, and I think it's something that we can all probably relate to, right? You get that new student who transfers into your class, and it honestly doesn't matter what you do. You could have the greatest icebreakers prepared, you can get up and you can speak on the student's behalf, or you might have a really brave student who gets up and introduces himself or herself to all of these strangers out in the classroom. But it doesn't matter, because no matter what you do, no matter your efforts, no matter how creative and clever your icebreakers might be, that student still ends up sitting quietly and maybe even a little awkwardly for the first few days of class. And they get subjected to these really kind of wary glimpses from all of their other peers, right? Now, I'm a bit more outgoing, far more outgoing actually. And so I struggled for a long time to really understand this new student syndrome. Why, I wondered, can't students come in and make this transition more smoothly on both sides? Well, I found my answer in really one of the most unexpected places, right? So here we go. A few years ago, my niece, 12 years old, wanted a puppy for Christmas, right? If you're out there and you have children, and even if you don't have your own, you work with children, you are familiar with this. Mom, can I have a dog? Dad, can I have a dog? Can I have a cat? Can I have a fish? Can I have a pet iguana? Whatever it could be. She wanted a puppy. Her father finally relented and he got her the puppy for Christmas and brought it home. Well, when he brought the puppy home, the first thing he did was to introduce it to its new big sisters, two 10-year-old labs. And this is a fairly accurate representation of what happened, okay? You've got these two big Labradors that meet this little ball of fluff, and they can't handle it. One of them is barking constantly. The other one, I kid you not, runs hell-bent for leather every time this little 3-month-old puppy comes near it. And we just found this hilarious. Couldn't stop laughing. But in watching their antics, something occurred to me, and I wish that I could stand here before you and say that, it's this really profound realization, but I think it was actually a lot more common sense. And that is the fact that we fear that which is different from us, right? We fear the unknown. This probably doesn't come as a surprise to anybody out here. Indeed, as educators, we are asked to combat this fear by teaching tolerance and using culturally responsive pedagogy. We're asked to not only observe diversity, but to celebrate it every chance that we get. Yet this fear still persists. The very climate of our current society makes it clear that this fear still persists. And no matter our efforts to get students to be exposed to differences, to be exposed to this concept that I'm going to call the other, on some level, we're failing. So my question then becomes, how do we get these students not just to acknowledge and accept that differences are out there, but to actively seek them out as a means of broadening their own understanding? Now, for me, the answer lies in something called schema. Okay, and some of you have probably heard of schema or schema criticism. Schema, according to a Stanford professor of English, Paula Moya, refers to a collection of perceptions, feelings, actions that are all based on your past experience and your anticipated experiences, right? So it's kind of a mouthful. The way that she clarifies, she says, think of schema as the variety of lenses through which you view life. And your schema is entirely subjective. It's a true reflection of the self, right? Your past and anticipated experiences. So anything that lies outside of your schema is different. It's unknown. Now, first thing I do with my students every year is a schema project. They come in, I introduce this concept to them, and we do the loved or hated, depending which side of the fence you're on, tree map. And I ask them, think about the people in your life. Think about your hobbies, think about your pastimes. I'd like you to consider what you want to do in the future. Where are you going to go to school? What are you going to study? What sort of job or industry might you want to work in? And the kids put together their maps and they get up and they give these presentations and they're really proud of themselves. And who can blame them, right? You probably feel really comfortable giving a presentation on yourself. What could you know better? Well, after we introduce this concept is when we start switching over and we start talking about literature, because I am an English teacher. And I gotta be honest with you, the very first novel that my students read, they despise. Ceremony, Leslie Marmon Silko. Excellent novel. But it's different than anything that these kids have experienced thus far. It's not linear, it's cyclical. It's indigenous literature. It's not part of that old canon that we are slowly starting to move away from. Not only is it cyclical, it's bicultural, and it interweaves the oral tradition in with the written text without benefit of chapter break, heading, subheading, title, and really not a lot of space. So these kids really struggle with this novel. And when we finish it, I do that thing that I think all of us teachers, we might be just a little bit sadistic when we kind of ask, how'd you like it? We already know what the answer's going to be. So we finish reading and I say, what did you guys think? And I get this chorus of, it was terrible, or I hated it, it's boring, it doesn't make any sense. And then I do that other thing that we do as teachers where I just stand there smiling the whole time. And you guys all know this, it takes a moment. And finally one kid says, Miss Schol, why are you smiling? We told you it sucks. And I tell them, it's not that it sucks. It's not a bad book. It's actually a really good book. And it's not even that you hated the book, it's that it's different. It lies outside of your schema. You just don't know it. Now, let me backtrack for just a moment, okay? I do teach at a local high school, Long Beach Poly. I teach sophomore students, so we're talking 15, 16 years old. I can promise you as I stand here that none of my students fought in World War II. I can also promise you, guarantee really, that none are suffering from shell shock or battle fatigue or PTSD as a result of World War II. A few of my students have ever adorned a uniform, so they're not really sure what it means to be judged differently based on the way that you dress. And my current population of students, only a few of them have ever experienced direct discrimination from their government just because of who they are. So for me to ask them to understand the struggles of protagonist Tayo, a mixed ancestry Laguna Pueblo man who fights in World War II and sacrifices his sense of self for a country that cares nothing for him when he returns, seems crazy. And it is. I don't actually expect them to understand and relate to everything that Tayo goes through in this novel. But that's where the magic starts to occur. Because you see, the plot, the issues, the action in Ceremony lies so far outside of my students' schema that it's only natural for them to react and dismiss the novel as bad. And that's where I step in and teach them, and I counter their argument and I say, no, it's not bad, it's just different. You just can't relate. And that's the opportunity for growth that we all need to take advantage of in our classrooms. Now, we've got literature, history, math, science, art, music. All of these subjects provide us with an opportunity to create new schemas for our students. The more we expose our students to different subject matter, to different feelings, to different experiences, the better they're going to be able to understand and empathize and access the experiences of the other. And the more that we add new schema for our students, the more they will be able to tear down preconceived notions, stereotypes, prejudice, bias, fear. And that's what's going to enable them to really start bridging the gap between themselves and this concept of the other. Now, what do I mean exactly by the other? This is not it, okay? This is the outdated, kind of more archaic, and if you really wanted to get down to it, racially biased idea of the other, the black sheep. That doesn't cover it anymore. To be honest, it never covered it to begin with. The other that I'm talking about refers to the very structure of our society. Any person, culture, experience, language that lies outside of what is considered dominant is, by its very definition, marginalized and the other. And in our society, in American society, the dominant is the white patriarchy, and the dominant language is English. So if you are not a white male who speaks English, you are part of the other. Now, I have a problem with this, because our dominant society is not an accurate reflection of who we are. Look around. Look at all the people. Look at someone next to you. It's not accurate. I can promise you, as I stand here, that there are women in America. I'm one of them, right? I can promise you that there are immigrants, there are first-generation Americans. There are people whose first language was not English, and they're not only in America, they are American. Now, the other problem with this diagram is that you can exist on the margins of our society and be the other, and regard somebody else who's been marginalized also as the other. So if I'm looking up here, I can be a Chinese immigrant woman who meets a Spanish-speaking Muslim, and we regard each other as the other. Because we're different. Different schema. It's the unknown. What I hope I'm communicating to you guys today is that we can teach our children that they no longer have to fear the other. That the more they get to know the other, the more they're going to start seeing differences are just that, differences. There's nothing scary, there's nothing bad, just a new way of looking at something. And I gotta be honest with you guys, differences are our greatest resource and our greatest tool for teaching. Because nothing challenges a student to think more critically than something that is different. They have to leave their comfort zone, they have to let go of past experience, and they can't even rely on prior knowledge. They have to transport themselves out into unfamiliar territory. And as you well know, that is where the learning occurs. So, helping our students build new schema broadens their understanding. It affects change in the way they view social issues. It creates a platform for them to explore social justice. And the more we add to these new schemas, the more we talk about social issues, the more we create dialogues in our classrooms about sensitive and oftentimes really uncomfortable subject matter, the better we equip these students to tackle social justice, to create change for themselves, for their communities, and our society at large. This isn't easy, takes risk. It's a really difficult thing to challenge the status quo because you're going to offend somebody. Your students, their parents, your coworkers that walk past the hall and kind of stick a head in when you're in the middle of teaching. And God forbid your principal, right? You'll offend someone. But I can tell you that it's worth it. And it's absolutely necessary. Because when you start doing this, you teach your students not only what they're thinking, but to consider why they're thinking it. You teach them that differences are not something to react to with fear or hostility. You're teaching them to go out and embrace differences, because with those differences, they challenge themselves, they learn, they grow, and they reach a point where they can start affecting change for society as a whole. So I hope that as you guys leave here today, you'll think about what we can do to not just talk about differences, but find them, analyze them, embrace them, and use them as a platform to finally start getting our society to be a stronger, more cohesive unit. Thank you.